But as he's listening to these whispers that are happening, and he's realizing that it's not somebody on the outside of his cell who's talking, it's somebody talking somehow on the inside of his cell.
So, once again, you found yourself at the campsite of the Orator. Well, please pull up a chair. As you can see, my fire is stoked, which means tonight I have another tale to tell. But before we begin, if you find yourself enjoying this kind of content, first-hand true accounts of the supernatural, paranormal, things that go bump in the night, that allow the spirits to guide your planchette to both the like and subscribe button as well as the notification bell. That way you get notified every time I upload new content, and it allows me to continue to do what I love, which is telling terrifying tales. Second, all of my stories are true first-hand accounts of the supernatural and paranormal. Today comes from us from Redditor Southern Fried Spooky. I will make sure to link his original story below, but if you're anyone you know has a story that you think would fit well on my channel, then please reach out to me on any of my social media. I will link those below as well. We can find a time to connect, collect your story, and then hopefully one day feature it here on the Orator. And now, with all of that out of the way, let's get on to today's story. It is a tale that I call Whispers in Solitary. So Andy is 18 years old, and he has found himself in some pretty serious trouble. He's gotten charged with armed burglary, and he is sentenced to 2 years in federal prison in Orlando, Florida, which is where he lives. It's the year 2010, and he's going to go away for 2 years in prison. And he's just this young guy. And he's pretty upset about this, but before he goes to prison, they're going to take him to this kind of like a transfer facility, and he's only supposed to be there for like a week or two while they prepare his place in prison. And so they take him to this facility, and he's let in, and they process him there, and they lead him basically to the center of this facility, and the place he's going to be staying in, all the cells in the center of this place, they call it the honeycomb because of the way that it's arranged. If you were to sort of look straight down at this structure, it would look like the inside of a beehive, and that was sort of like the cell structure. And so they lead him in, and he gets his cell. And for the first couple days, things were a little bit intense, but not terrible. You know, there were people that he kind of liked. There were people he didn't like. He was trying to be cautious around people. But this is sort of a processing facility, and most people are only here, like I said, for like a week or two. So he saw a lot of new faces. And, you know, they pass the time by telling stories and hanging out mostly. And he heard all kinds of stories. He said that's like one of the main things that happens when you're incarcerated in jail or prison or anything like that. Everybody has stories. They have stories about how crazy their crimes were and what they did and what landed them in there. They have stories about previous stints in other prisons. They have stories about certain guards or certain rooms or certain wings of the prison, stuff like that. And so he heard a lot of these stories. He said, you know, every single person that comes through has their own stories. But one story that he heard over and over, and he heard multiple versions, was about this specific facility, and it was about the solitary wing. If you were to go in solitary confinement, they said that there was a room in that area that was haunted. So solitary confinement is when you're in serious trouble even within the prison. Like if you get in trouble once you're inside, they lock you in this tiny little room away from everybody. You eat your meals in there. You do basically everything there. I mean, they lock you in. You don't see anybody until your stint is up. And so they said, you know, that area was really haunted. They said there was a ghost in there, and at night it would torture you by whispering and whispering and whispering. And if you decided to fall asleep instead of and ignore the whispers instead of like doing something about it, it would harm you somehow. And he heard multiple versions about how to, you know, stay away from getting hurt with the spirit. Some people said there was a certain Bible verse. There were some people who said you just had to talk back to it. I mean, there were all sorts of different things. Some people said you couldn't sleep the whole night. You just had to stay up if it started whispering to you. And so he had heard all of these different stories. And on the one hand, he just thought it was all a bit ridiculous. But on the other hand, what else are you going to do to pass the time in prison? So he just sort of took the stories at face value as entertainment, and he moved on. And after a couple days of being in this facility, there was a pretty serious problem that happens with Andy. He gets into a fight with a gang. And of course, within prisons, you're definitely going to have different factions. And this specific faction was trying to charge other inmates money for their protection. And Andy right away was like, I don't want anything to do with this. I'm only here for a couple weeks. Please just leave me alone and let me go about my business. These gang members were not about to let that pass. And so a huge fight breaks out between Andy and these two other gang members. And pretty immediately, the guards rush in. They take him to the ground. They handcuff him. And they are pretty angry at what just happened here. And so the guards take the two gang members plus Andy, and they march them to solitary confinement. And they throw Andy in the room, and they tell him, you have 2 weeks in solitary confinement, which is basically his entire stint in this facility before he gets moved to his actual, the actual prison in Orlando where he's going to be doing his full 2 years. And so just a couple days in, even though he really didn't want to instigate anything, Andy has now found himself in solitary confinement. And, in some ways, he's kind of happy about this because on the outside of solitary confinement in this place, there's already people who don't like him. He already got into this big fight. It's a dangerous place being in here because there's all these people from all over the place, and they know they're only going to be there for a little bit before they get transferred out. So it's like a lot of these people, especially the really bad ones, they don't care if they hurt you or get in more trouble. I mean, they're already going to prison. This is just a way stop in between. And so Andy, he sees solitary confinement as a way to be away from all of that. They're going to let him sit in this room by himself. He still gets 3 square meals a day. He can read as much as he wants, and they're going to give him his art supplies so he can practice his art. And so in his head, he's like, this is kind of, in some ways, a best case scenario. And for the first 3 days, that's exactly what it was. Andy developed a very straightforward routine. He'd wake up in the morning, he would exercise, he'd eat his breakfast, he would go back to sleep, and he would sleep all the way until lunch. He'd wake up, he'd eat lunch, he would read for a little while, he'd practice his art for a little while, dinner would come, he'd eat that, he'd exercise, and then he'd go to sleep. And every single day for 3 days, that was his exact routine. And then the third night came. And night 3 happens, he lays down, he's getting ready to go to sleep after he's just eaten dinner and exercised, and he's sitting there kind of waiting for sleep to take him, when all of a sudden he hears somebody talking. And right away, Andy thinks, oh, maybe one of the guards is coming up to talk to me, because every once in a while, one of the guards that was doing patrols, there's patrols all over the prison. Every 15 minutes, someone would swing by and check on him. And so he's thinking, potentially, this is one of the security guards coming through at night and talking to him. And so Andy, he gets up, and there's no, remember, he's in solitary confinement, so there's no, cell bars. It's a solid door, metal door, with a tiny little slot. And so he kind of gets up, and he kind of puts his head next to the slot, thinking that the officer, the prison guard, he's going to open this slot, and they're going to have a conversation. And so he gets up to it, and he's listening. But as he's listening to these whispers that are happening, Andy's realizing that it's not somebody on the outside of his cell who's talking. It's somebody talking somehow on the inside of his cell. Now, this room that he's in, this solitary confinement room, it's really tiny. It's got one tiny little bed for him. It's got a sink/toilet combination. It has a tiny little desk for him to read or practice his art or whatever he's going to do there. And then it doesn't even have a chair to that desk. It's just a concrete slab sitting there. And then it's got one tiny little window, which is his only source of light. There's no light hanging or anything like that. And it's just this tiny little window that lets in just a little bit of light so he can kind of see. And that's it. And so for something or someone to be inside whispering in this cell with him is impossible. There's just nowhere to be hiding at all. And yet, as he turns around and he's listening, it is very clear that the whispering is coming from somewhere inside the cell. And so, using the moonlight, which is the only light he has, it's very dark in here, he starts trying to kind of explore this teeny tiny room. I mean, he's looking under the sink and around the toilet, and he's looking by his desk, and I mean, there's nowhere for a person to hide, but he's thinking, maybe I can discover something that is going to make me understand what is happening here. And so as he's looking around the room, he's not getting anything. And then he looks under his tiny little bed, and there's not enough space for someone to fit under there. But he leans down, and he's looking under his bed. And as he's looking under his bed, something whispers right behind him, right in his ear. You're not even close. And the second that happens, Andy, he freaks out. He goes from thinking something might be in the cell to somebody was just standing right behind me right now in my cell whispering to me. And all of a sudden, these ghost stories that he's heard about something haunting this block, he goes from thinking, obviously, those are nonsense to, oh my God, this is real and I'm experiencing it right now. And so he goes from being curious to panicked virtually immediately. And he starts yelling out, help! I need help in here! I need a guard! Come on, right now! Help me, please! And pretty quickly, a guard makes his way around, and he's like, what's going on there? And Andy's like, please, something's in here with me. I know it sounds crazy, but something's in here with me. You have got to get me out of here. Now, you have to understand, when you're in a facility like this, the guards are virtually never nice, pleasant people, right? Their job is to keep criminals in line, and it's obviously a very difficult thing, especially when you have people who are violent or could cause harm, and so they have to be extra firm to try to keep that stuff in check. And so anytime something like this happens, they either err on the side of caution or they're just outright mean and don't care because they're dealing with prisoners. And so this security guard, he comes up and Andy's screaming at him, I need to get out of here, I need to get out of here. And the security guard, he doesn't care at all. He just tells Andy, you better shut your mouth or I'm going to come in there, I'm going to beat the crap out of you, I'm going to leave you in your cell, and then you're still going to be hearing whispers, but you're going to have a broken skull. You understand me? I'm going to come in there and I'm going to hurt you, and you don't want that, so you better shut your mouth right now. And so Andy, he's thinking oh my God, what am I going to do? But he knows if he keeps going, that's what this guard is going to do, is he's going to come in here, he's going to hurt him, and he's going to leave him there. And on top of that, now Andy's like, oh my God, everybody's going to think I'm this laughing stock, this crazy person who went nuts in solitary confinement. And that's exactly what the guard is saying. He's like, oh yeah, you believe in these ghosts? Yep, the ghost is here to get you. He's like, you wait till I tell everybody else and see how it goes for you in this prison. And so now Andy, he's super freaking out. And so he's like, all right, I got to be quiet. Even though something's happening in here, I can't get this guard on my case. And so he stops and he's turning around and he's thinking, when all of a sudden he realizes the whispers are gone. It's totally quiet again. And so he sits there and he's kind of looking around his dark cell and he's thinking, and it's totally quiet. And then the guard just walks away. Doesn't listen to anything else, doesn't care. The prisoner is quiet, so he did his job and he's gone. And so Andy very tentatively lays down and he's sitting there thinking for a second. And then all of a sudden it was like, he felt like it was an energy dump, and so all of a sudden he was exhausted, but he said it felt really weird. He went from being awake and alert to asleep immediately. There was almost no transition. He said it felt very weird how all of a sudden he was awake and alert and kind of freaked out to totally exhausted and could not keep his eyelids open. And so Andy falls asleep almost immediately after that. And then the next morning, he opens his eyes, and there are 3 guards standing over him, and they looked angrier than any guards he had seen before. He said these guys were ready to beat the tar out of him. And he kind of rubs the sleep from his eyes. He's like, what's going on? The guard's like, oh, okay, so this is how you're going to act. We tell you to quiet down, and you're going to throw some kind of tantrum? Is that it? Okay, well, guess what? You're in here the entire 2 weeks that you're supposed to stay here, and you're not getting any more toilet paper. You can use what you've used in this room, what you've done in this room. Just use that toilet paper because you're not getting any more. And Andy, he's completely confused. Toilet paper? What are you guys talking about? And so he sits up and he looks around his room, and his room is destroyed. All of his art, all of the toilet paper, all of it. Completely ripped up, to shreds, and it's everywhere. And he notices his ink pen that he was using to draw and make his pictures, it's broken in half and it's on the ground. And he looks on his desk, his little writing desk, and someone had taken the ink from this pen and spread it all across his desk, and it said, "See you later." And Andy, he's dizzy at this point, because not only did obviously he not do this, but he's thinking, how could I or anyone have slept through this. This room is destroyed. It looks like a bomb went off in here. And I somehow slept through all this. And so he's really confused, and the guards are yelling at him about it. And he's like trying to tell him, no, this wasn't me. I don't know what happened, but they're not having any of it. And then basically they just say, you're responsible for cleaning this up, and when we come back, it better be clean. And they shut the door, and they leave him in there. And so after a little bit of kind of collecting himself and realizing that something supernatural has happened in this room and he can't possibly explain it, Andy goes about picking up the stuff. He just takes his time and he slowly collects this little bit of toilet paper that's shredded all over, and he stacks it up, and he tries to get as much of his art together as he can, and eventually he gets the room clean. And then he's just sort of sitting there. I mean, his whole routine for the day has been messed up, but he's just, in his head, he's trying to process how any of this could be possible. When suddenly the door to his wing opens back up, and the guards come in and they say, hey, it's time to take a shower. And so they strip him down, they put him in handcuffs, and they start to lead him away. And as they're leading him away, they're still berating him about the room. They're like, oh boy, I hope it was worth it. You know, you completely destroyed the room, you made all of us really angry, and you hurt yourself. And Andy's like, what do you mean I hurt yourself? They're like, look what you did to your back. I don't even know how the heck you did that. What, did you scratch yourself on the bed in your frantic, fury last night? What? And Andy, he's walking by this mirror, and he turns and looks, and he has this deep gash from the top right of his shoulder blade all the way down to the center of his spine, this deep cut. And the guard's like, well, that wasn't there before. And Andy's like, yeah, it wasn't there before. How did I not notice this thing? How did this happen? And in his head, it's like, it's just too much. The whispering, the room, now he's injured, which the story said would happen if you just go to sleep and ignore the voices. And it's like, it's just not possible. And it's all swirling in his head, and he goes from being okay to completely unconscious. He passes right out. It is just too overwhelming for him. And then sometime later, Andy slowly comes to, and he's clearly in the infirmary of this prison. And, the first thing he's noticing as he's waking up is that the guard, who was kind of yelling at him, was getting berated by the nurse or the doctor on staff. She's yelling at him, how could you have done this? And I can't possibly defend you. You cannot hurt people so bad that they have to come into our hospital. And she's like, I don't even know if you're going to be able to keep your job. I don't know what I'm going to be able to tell them that could justify you hurting this person so bad that they're unconscious with this deep gash on his back. And as Andy's coming to, he's realizing what's happening. He's like, no. It wasn't him. He didn't do this. I passed out. Nobody hurt me. They didn't cut me. None of that. And so, he kind of looks at the guard, and the guard looks immediately relieved. Because in his head, he's thinking, how could I have explained this stuff? What happened? And so he's very relieved that Andy is vouched for him, because Andy could have just as easily lied, to get him in trouble. And so they kind of exchange a minute with each other, and Andy just says, listen, I know you think I'm crazy, all right? But I am telling you, something happened in that room that I don't understand. I can't explain it. And all I want is to move rooms. If you just move me to a different solitary room, I swear I'll do the rest of my stint without any problems. I swear. I don't want to be a problem. All right? I don't want to be a problem. And so then him and this guard talk it out, and the guard's like, all right, fine. Since you vouched for me and you did something good for me, I'm going to take care of you too. And so after that, Andy got moved to his new room. And for the next 2 weeks in that solitary room went exactly how we had anticipated it going. He got out. He transferred to the new facility in Orlando. He did his 2-year stint. And here we are all of these years later. And Andy said he's a reformed man. He's never committed another crime after that. And he said that experience in solitary confinement was, he said, I'm never going to be in a place that I'm locked away and can't defend myself ever again. And so he said after that, he decided he was going to go straight, and all the way until now he has. So all that to say, congratulations to Southern Fried Spooky. And so that is going to do it for today's story. If you found yourself enjoying this or any of the stories on my channel, then please allow the spirits to guide your planchette to both the like and subscribe button, as well as the notification bell. That way you get notified every time I upload new content, and it allows me to continue to do what I love, which is telling terrifying tales. Second, all of my stories are true, first-hand accounts of the supernatural and paranormal. Today's story from Southern Fried Spooky will be linked below, but if you or somebody you know has a story that you think will fit well on my channel, don't comment below. reach out to me on one of my social media so we can find a time to get together, collect your story, and then hopefully one day feature it here on the Orator. And so until next time, where you'll pull up your chair, my fire will be stoked, and I will have another tale to tell.